Hi, quick little reader's note before we get started. I asked to PODFIC this thing, like, a long time ago, and, like, if the author doesn't want this up anymore, I haven't heard anything about it, but if they don't want this up anymore, totally get it. Just, like, shoot me a DM, or, like, comment on the AO3 page of this PODFIC. I'll take it down. No questions asked. Cool? Cool. Also, if you just don't want it on YouTube, because, like, that's totally fair. Okay, that's all. Hope you enjoy. The Taste of Coffee by Samwise96. Read by The Nomad's Crow. This fanfic is 14,548 words in one chapter. Here's the summary. In a world full of all kinds of soulmate bonds, Todoroki, Shoto, and Midoriya Izuku are graced with soul habits. Every morning, Todoroki wakes up and makes coffee for someone he's never met, and every night, Midoriya goes to bed in a freezing room longing for someone who's never there. Unexplainable to others, and to even themselves, they developed habits that are supposed to make sense when they finally get to meet the person that they are meant for. But what happens when you can't find the person you're meant for? What happens when you do? If you love acts of service, this one's for you. Shoto woke up 5 minutes before his alarm went off, and when he saw the time, he forced his body to stay still and closed his eyes again. Maybe, just maybe, he could fall back asleep, squeeze out a couple extra minutes of sleep. It would make all the difference. It would be worth it. His alarm went off. It had not been worth it. Now, he was even more groggy than when he'd woken up the first time. With a sigh, he kicked off his covers and got ready for the day. The sun wasn't even up yet. He wiped sleep from the corners of his eyes as he opened the kitchen cabinet and pulled down his coffee grinder. He'd bought a new bean to try, but today didn't feel like a day he should try something new. He fell back to two old favorites, ground beans, and mixed them to the exact ratio. He took a second to inhale the familiar, comforting smell. As the coffee brewed, he cleaned up his mess, putting away the extra coffee that had been made for another morning if he was running late. He grabbed Natsuo's coffee mug from the cabinet and the travel mug with Sakura flowers. "Only one pot today?" Natsuo wandered in, no doubt lured by the smell. He was barely awake. Shoto hummed softly in confirmation. "No chance of you leaving me the whole thing, is there? I had a late shift and my next shift starts in..." He glances at the clock in the microwave. 4 hours. I promised that I would bring some to a friend. Shoto poured the rest of the coffee into the travel mug. Natsuo sipped from his mug, even though it was much too hot. "Ah, it tastes so good." "How can you taste anything when you burn your tongue?" "Shh, shh, shh." Natsuo dropped his head over his mug and breathed deeply. "Don't ruin the moment." Shoto shook his head and grabbed his bag. "Will we be back in time for dinner, or should I just get takeout?" "Takeout." "Okay, have a good day at work." "Bye, baby brother." Shoto browsed through different coffee makers on his laptop. He already had the standard drip and a French press. Natsuo hinted that he wanted an espresso machine, but Shoto thought that was a little excessive. That, and they didn't have much space in their kitchen anyway. What he really wanted to buy was a siphon coffee maker, but they came in so many different styles and none of them were cheap. He would have to wait for one to go on sale. There were several blogs that said it could produce the best tasting coffee, and that's what he wanted to make. "Momo, why are we here so early?" Jiro whined. "Because this was the best time that worked for all of our schedules," Momo answered. Shoto held up a travel mug of coffee, which Momo took and handed to Jiro. "Thank you, and good morning, Shoto," Momo said, setting her and her girlfriend's things down on the table. The library was empty at this time of the morning, and it had been easy to secure a table big enough for them, but also enough space to spread out. Jiro took a hearty sip. "You should just quit school and open a cafe. Your talent is wasted here." Shoto shook his head. He had this conversation several times before with Jiro. I have no interest in making coffee for other people. Why do you go through all the extra steps? You told me once the urge could be satisfied by using instant coffee and a pre-timed coffee maker. Mama asked. Yeah, for someone who says he's not interested in finding a soulmate, all your actions point to the opposite, Jiro added. I don't care about finding my soulmate. I care about finishing my degree, Shoto said. And you're Googling coffee makers and making special blends of coffee and waking up an hour earlier to do it all. Yeah, buddy, I believe you. Jiro snorted and drank more coffee. Shoto didn't have any way to refute her. She and Momo were one of the lucky ones that had a simple, straightforward connection. From where he was sitting across the table, he could read the words on the inside of Jiro's wrist. I love this song. He knew Momo had a different yet matching phrase that read, I wrote it about the day I would meet my soulmate. First words that turned golden when spoken. Their connection didn't interfere with their everyday lives. Shoto envied them. He was stuck with one of the more uncommon connections, soul habits. When he turned 15, he woke up with the urge to make coffee every morning, even though he hated coffee, but not his soulmate. Nothing bad happened, exactly, if Shoto refused to make coffee, but he felt off for the rest of the day, like he'd forgotten something important, like an itch he couldn't scratch. Some days, he woke up with the urge to make one pot of coffee. Sometimes he needed to make two. It was whatever he sensed his soulmate needed at the time. He couldn't explain it to anyone else, how he knew how much to make. No more than he could explain the urge to make coffee that he didn't drink. It was just somehow he knew that his soulmate hadn't gotten much sleep the night before, and they insisted on being a morning person regardless. Shoto hated to do things by half measures. He could make it easier on himself by using instant coffee and a regular coffee machine, but he felt like he was cheating his soulmate. No, he wasn't actively searching for a soulmate, but if he ever found them, he wanted to be able to serve them a good cup of coffee, even if that's all they ever got out of their meeting. So, every morning, he got up to make coffee. When he had free time from his classes and was in the mood, he would research the coffee-making process, buy different beans, try different brew methods, and test out his creations on his family and friends. Even though drinking coffee in the morning wasn't his habit, the act of creating it was. It relaxed him in a way nothing else could. You know, I think Ida has a friend who also has soul habits, Jiro said. No, thank you. Shoto minimized the browser where he had tabs dedicated to his research. Come on, let's get started on the research. Momo steered the conversation away from the topic of soulmates. It's the first day of class. We don't have any research projects yet, Jiro complained. We don't yet. Izuku sneezed and shoved his hands under his arms. He didn't remember what being warm felt like. If you get snot on my hoodie, I will shove the sketchbook so far up your ass, Kachan threatened. Man, Mito bro, you got me freezing just looking at you. Kirishima headed his violently red, puffy coat onto the clothing pile that was Midoriya. Thanks, Kirishima. Izuku did his best to suppress another shiver. Shitty hair, hold up the swatches, Kachan growled. It's shitty hair, hold up those swatches, please. The blonde ground out something that might have sounded like a please, but Izuku didn't think so. Kirishima held up the two fabric swatches as Kachan eyed them like the fabric had personally offended him. Izuku sneezed again and sighed. Who needs the room to be 57 degrees to sleep at night? Most doctors recommend that you keep it cool at night to sleep better, Kirishima said. It's the middle of winter, Izuku protested. Yeah, that's true. Why don't you just sleep with more blankets or get a heated one, dipshit? Aw, Kachan, you do care, Izuku sniffled. Izuku got a glimpse of a detailed waistcoat as one of Bakugo's extra sketchbooks nearly took his head off. But to answer your question, I can afford a heated blanket when I'm paying for my insane electric bill. Speaking of soulmates, sort of, how did that mixer go? Kirishima asked, draping a different fabric over his shoulder. It went okay, Izuku answered. You didn't meet the one? Of course you didn't meet the one, or else we would have heard about it, Bakugo grumbled. I thought he could have, Kirishima protested. The boy's freezing over there. Nah, I think they must have gone to bed hot. Workout followed by a hot shower, so they dropped the temperature a little lower than normal. It happens from time to time, so I wouldn't call this getting more intense. Plus, I've read that when other people get closer to the one they're supposed to be with, they develop more habits. More habits? One isn't enough? How else is he supposed to figure out who his soulmate is? Bakugo manhandled Kirishima into a different position and adjusted the fabric accordingly. I still don't really get it, Kirishima complained. What Kachan means is that my connection isn't as straightforward as yours and his is. Seeing color when you touch for the first is pretty obvious, whereas a whole bunch of people probably sleep in cool temperatures. It doesn't exactly help you pinpoint a soulmate. With more habits and a greater intensity, it becomes easier to narrow down who it is, in theory anyway.
That kinda sucks. Your soulmate's trying to give you a cold and you don't know what's coming next.
It's not so bad. I like to think of it sort of like the acts of service love language. When you love someone, you do little things for them to make their day better, like being willing to sleep in colder temperatures. My body is more ahead of it than my mind is.
Kirishima hummed in thought. I guess. It wouldn't matter so much when you find your soulmate. They could keep you warm at night. Izuku sputtered and turned bright red. I didn't mean it like that, but that works too. Don't you have class to get to, Deku?
Oh, crap, you're right. I'm just saying, a person's preconceived notions of another person affects their relationships, even before they officially meet. Take a look at Pride and Prejudice, for example.
Uh-huh, Shinzo drawled.
Would you say there have been studies on just that thing, backed up with statistics and quantifiable data? Izuku jiggled his foot while he talked.
Midoriya, I must ask you to sit still, Ida reprimanded. He hefted the smaller boy up higher on his back. You are likely to aggravate your ankle.
Sorry, Ida-kun, but I'm fine. You really don't have to carry me. I only twisted my ankle a little.
I'm walking you to the library, and that is final. Going down the stairs while you are reading blueprints. Honestly, Midoriya, you're lucky your injury isn't worse.
Izuku refrained from saying he'd had worse. He knew Ida well enough to know how that conversation would go. Anyway, Izuku prompted Shinzo.
I'm sure there have been studies on prejudice before. No, I haven't read all of them.
But there are studies. So what you could do for your final project is look at a person's preconceived notions of their soulmate and look at how they match up when they actually meet their soulmate. How does that affect their relationship? How many of them click instantly? How many are repelled because they built up a different idea of that person in their head?
I think all soulmates click, Midoriya. That's kind of the point. Shinzo pointed to the yellow band with a black stripe running through it on his wrist. A purple one had appeared when he met a soulmate Kaminari Denki in general psychology course their second year.
Still, not everyone chooses to marry their soulmates. Some stay friends, he protested.
Izuku snapped his mouth shut and glanced at Ida. I wonder if there are cases where someone hates their soulmate, rejecting them completely. Ida wondered as he walked Izuku over to the couch that he usually claimed. I'm sure it happens, Shinzo said carefully. But almost everyone I've come across has been in a romantic relationship with their soulmate. And even then, Midoriya's right. Most people have a good relationship with their soulmate, even if they stay friends. Isn't it sad to think of someone rejecting half of their soul, Ida sighed.
It is, Izuku quietly agreed. But I don't think that's what'll happen to you.
Ida nodded, but he was quickly distracted by one of the most beautiful men that Izuku had ever laid eyes on. Hello, Todoroki. Todoroki lifted his eyes from a textbook. Hey, Ida. Ida crouched down so Izuku could climb off his back and settle on the couch. Ida checked his watch. You need to sit here for an hour at least before you get back on your feet.
Izuku gave him a nod.
Shinzo, how long do you plan on staying here? Ida asked.
About another 30 minutes until Denki gets out of the night class.
Ida looked back to Izuku. He gave his friend his best smile, but it just made Ida frown. He turned to the beautiful boy. Todoroki, how long are you planning on studying at the library?
About an hour, he answered.
If it's no trouble, can I ask you to watch Midoriya and make sure he doesn't get out before you leave? He injured his ankle and needs to rest it.
Ida-kun, Izuku protested.
Yeah, it's no problem. Thank you. I've got to get going. I told Uraraka and Asui I would help them study for a math quiz. Good night. Ida waved at them all and left, but not before stopping 3 times to make sure that Izuku hadn't moved from his spot. When Ida was out of sight, Izuku buried his face into his hands and groaned. I can't believe I said that. I should think before I speak. You didn't completely put your foot in your mouth, but yeah, I wouldn't have brought up soulmates in front of Ida, Shinzo said.
But it's hard for him to see a soulmate in love with another person, and Ida-kun is so nice that he willingly puts himself in a position to help Uraraka, even if it hurts him.
The whole situation is too much. If I were him, I would want distance. Shinzo rested his head on the back of the couch. Does Uraraka know?
Yeah, they have soul bands too. It's kind of hard not to notice. I've talked to Uraraka about it, and she feels so torn between them. She loves Sue so much, but she feels like there's a part of her that should be dating Ida since they're soulmates, and it's not like she doesn't love Ida, and she feels like she could come to love him in a romantic way, but she just can't throw away what she has with Sue.
Shinzo looked thoughtfully at the ceiling for a long time. Your friend group is complicated, Midoriya.
Don't I know it, Izuku sighed.
Maybe they could all 3 date?
Izuku hummed. That's for them to figure out if that's what they want.
Like I said, Uraraka isn't in love with Ida, not romantically, and Ida is keeping his distance out of respect for Uraraka's feelings. Izuku stretched out, propping his foot on the armrest and using Shinzo's lap as a pillow. What did it feel like when you met Kaminari? You'll find out when you meet your own soulmate. Aw, Shinzo, don't be like that. I want to know, Izuku whined. Don't you have homework? I'll do it after you leave, promise. Come on, Shinzo, tell me the story. You and your puppy dog eyes. Good thing I'm a cat person. Shinzo! Shh, we're in the library. Crap, sorry, Izuku whispered, throwing a glance over at Todoroki. It was very hard not to keep looking at him, but if he looked over too many times, Shinzo would catch on and give him hell. He didn't need another thing to be teased over this week. Todoroki, for his part, didn't even seem to be paying them any attention. He had his headphones in and was intently studying something on his laptop, occasionally writing a note. The textbooks next to him all seemed to be about art museums. Izuku wondered how he and Ida had met, considering Ida was a business major and all. Izuku was snapped out of his musings by Shinzo's sigh. I don't know how to explain it, Izuku. I'll probably sound dumb, but it felt like I was shocked when I touched him for the first time. Like he woke me up with his dumb smile or something. That's not dumb. Izuku shook his head for emphasis. We partnered up for a project, and one thing led to another. We were both single, so we thought, hey, why not? It's not really rocket science how we got together, or even that romantic. But you're still together, and we're in our final semesters, so whatever you guys are doing, it must work. Do you still feel a spark when you touch him? I'm gonna gag if you get any cheesier. Put your hard eyes away. You're not even looking at me. It's for my own health. Shinzo covered his own eyes for emphasis. Yeah, whatever. You avoided my question. I'm not telling you that. You totally do. Shinzo pushed Izuku off his lap and stood up. I'm going. It's not even time to pick him up yet. I can wait outside of his class. Wait, Shinzo, I have one more question. No, Midoriya. Shinzo sounded exasperated, but Izuku knew that he hadn't well and truly hit Shinzo's buttons. Shinzo was only a bit embarrassed. He didn't feel any guilt when he asked. Do you know what Kaminari felt when he first met you? He didn't think Shinzo was going to answer, just to be a bit of a jerk. He said he liked my voice. When I spoke to him, everything got quiet. Shinzo looked impassive when he said it, but he wouldn't meet Izuku's eyes, and the tips of his ears looked a little too pink for sitting indoors. Izuku smiled. He loved hearing soulmate stories. He would never get tired of them. Maybe he should have been a sociology major like Shinzo so he could study all about the connection. I'm so happy for you, Hitoshi. Sap. Shinzo left without looking back, but Izuku saw that his ears were definitely more pink than they had been a minute ago. It was a good day when he could fluster one of his unflappable friends. Izuku felt like he'd won something. Obediently, Izuku opened his math textbook now that Shinzo had left. He propped the book against his slightly elevated thighs, using his backpack as a pillow to keep his head up. His calculator lay on his chest. He'd done homework like this thousands of times on this couch. He expected to fall easily into the routine of solving problems, but it was dark and he was sleepy. His mind kept wandering to everything but the numbers in front of him. He glanced at the time on his phone and found that he hadn't gotten one math problem finished in nearly 30 minutes. His hour of sitting was almost up, and then he could go back to his room and go to sleep early. He could do his homework in the morning. Izuku nibbled at the end of his pencil. He should at least get one problem done, or his guilt would eat him alive. He set to work scribbling down numbers to the first problem when his pencil snapped. He sat up and looked at the broken tip. He looked across the room where the electric pencil sharpener sat. How many times had he made that journey without thinking? He gauged the distance with his eyes. He was always very good with working with spaces. He couldn't walk, but maybe he could hop. It would take him about 29 or 30 strides, so that would be how many hops? Something poked him in the arm. Izuku broke off from his train of thought and looked at the mechanical pencil and then at the man holding it out to him. Don't jump over there. It'll chew me out if you hurt your ankle. Just take my pencil, Todoroki said. Izuku dropped his hand from his mouth, realizing too late that he'd been processing out loud again. Aren't you using it? Todoroki held up his other hand that had a pen resting between his fingers. Izuku took the pencil. He recognized the brand, but only because he and Ochako had made fun of how expensive it was at the stationery store. They'd wondered who would waste money on such a thing. Apparently, pretty boys named Todoroki, who also studied in the library. Thank you, Izuku blurted out when he realized he had taken it and had been staring at Todoroki in silence. Todoroki nodded and turned back to his own notes. Izuku got about halfway through the problem before he was distracted again. He glanced at Todoroki from under his hair, thankful that he hadn't gotten it cut recently so that it hung on his face. He was staring at his computer screen, but his eyes were a million miles away. Izuku kept glancing at him in short bursts until he realized it was probably safe to stare. Todoroki wasn't coming back to Earth anytime soon.
The man was striking. His features were delicate, but by no means conveying fragility. He'd only seen heterochromia in animals, so to see two-toned eyes on a person was fascinating. He wondered if this split hair was dyed, or if it had something to do with his eye condition. He wasn't a biology major, but you could ask Sue. Marine biology was close enough, right? He was a little surprised to not have seen the guy around before, even in passing. He knew the campus was big, but it wasn't that big. And if he knew Ida, then why hadn't Izuku run into him sooner? Maybe he was a transfer? How do you know Ida-kun? Izuku asked without thinking. Todoroki blinked and looked at Izuku. Pardon? Izuku repeated his question, much quieter this time, now that his embarrassment had caught up. Todoroki was really, really pretty. He was my math tutor last semester. Izuku thought back to if Ida had mentioned that before. He vaguely remembered Ida having to tutor a person once a week, but he was all about confidentiality and hadn't given a name. However, he did mention, were you the guy that did all of your math homework in pen? That would probably be me, yeah. Izuku couldn't help it. He laughed. Oh man, it drove Ida crazy, especially because you would make so many errors. Math isn't my strong suit. Todoroki rubbed the back of his neck. Oh, I didn't mean to embarrass you. He never said that you were a bad student. Ida would never do that. We just thought it was funny how he couldn't get you to use a pencil. I don't write heavy enough in pencil, Todoroki shrugged. I'm surprised we haven't met before now. My name is Midoriya Izuku, engineering and math double major. Izuku leaned off the couch and offered his hand. Todoroki gently took it. His hands were surprisingly very warm, almost hot. Felt good to Izuku's bones. Todoroki Shoto, art history major, and double minor in literature and art. I guess that's why I've never seen you around before, Izuku laughed. We're on two different sides of the education spectrum. Todoroki hummed. It's nice to finally meet you, Todoroki-kun. I hope we can become good friends. Izuku smiled. Todoroki blinked rapidly for a moment. He must be tired too. Me too, he answered. Shoto didn't have class until noon on Wednesdays, meaning he still got to the library by 10 in the morning. He didn't really see the point in hanging around his empty apartment. At least hanging out alone in the library seemed a little less sad. He nodded to the library director. He knew most of the staff by sight, if not by name at this point. He spent almost all of his free time between here and the art building. He put the 2 travel mugs on his usual table. He had made 2 pots of strong coffee this morning. He wasn't sure what his soulmate had been up to, but clearly they weren't taking the best care of themselves. At times like this, Shoto almost wished he knew who his soulmate was, so he could take them by the shoulders and ask them why they needed this ungodly amount of caffeine in the morning. Even in his head, he sounded more fondly exasperated than stern. He shook his head. He shouldn't be falling in love with the idea of a stranger with bad habits, but he still wished he knew who they were so he could pawn off some of this coffee. Shoto had left 1 pot for Natsuo, but he didn't know what to do with the 2 cups he'd brought. Good morning, Todoroki. Shoto turned toward Ida and gave him a small nod. Do you mind if I sit with you? Not at all, Shoto replied. Do you want some coffee? Your soulmate didn't get enough sleep again. Shoto shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. Ida sat across from Shoto and shook his head at the offered coffee. I've got orange juice. Shoto's phone buzzed. Mama declined the coffee, but Jiro said she would be by in a few minutes to pick up one of the mugs for herself. 1 down and 1 to go. Todoroki yawned and covered his mouth. He had stayed up too late watching the news. Why don't you drink it, Todoroki? Shoto wrinkled his nose. Caffeine makes me cranky, according to my family. They lapsed into silence as Ida pulled out some of the work he had to do. Shoto had gotten all of his work done that needed to be done because he lacked a social life. It was another reason that Shoto liked to hang out in the library. He would have to share his table and sometimes got pulled into random study groups. That's how he met other people. Shoto idly scrolled on his phone. Jiro picked up her coffee. Shoto still had an hour until his class. He propped his hand on his chin and looked at the pink band that was barely showing underneath Ida's watch. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop. Well, that wasn't exactly true. Shoto blamed Natsuo for picking up the bad habit. It was a game they'd played over dinner to see who had heard the craziest things, him at school or Natsuo at the hospital. Shoto liked the game because he wasn't a very interesting person, so it gave him something to talk about. He wouldn't tell Natsuo about Ida. It was too personal, but Shoto was kind of glad that he overheard. It helped him to place some of Ida's strange actions and strained facial expressions. He'd met Uraraka once last semester when Ida was tutoring him. She looked like a nice person. It just went to show how simple and how very complicated being a human was. Relationships would never be perfect, soulmate bonds included. You okay, Todoroki? Shoto returned to the present. Sorry, zoned out. He hoped that he hadn't been caught staring at the soul band.
That's okay. I only wanted to make sure nothing was wrong. Ida looked down at the coffee. I don't like to meddle when it comes to soulmates, but I know someone who also has soul habits. I'm not looking to find them, Ida. Ida sighed and gave Shoto a melancholy smile that made a lot more sense knowing what he knew now. I understand. Kachan, give me my drink back! No. Guys, remember we're in a library. Midoriya and two others rounded the corner. A guy with spiky blonde hair had his hand on Midoriya's face, pushing him away from the can that he held in his other hand. How many of these have you had? He asked Midoriya. I haven't had any yet. I just bought it. Midoriya, bro, you know those things aren't good for you. You gave yourself heart palpitations last year. Redhead with even spikier hair said. It was fine with Kirishima. That seemed to make the blonde even angrier. He took the untouched energy drink and threw it in the trash can. Kachan! Midoriya gasped. That's what you get for staying up too late, stupid. Kachan stalked off. Maybe try coffee? Kirishima offered gently, trying to comfort Midoriya as he was walking backwards to keep up with Kachan. But I spent the last of my budget on that drink! Midoriya wailed. Midoriya looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, bed head, slumped posture. His fingers were anxiously braiding the tassels at the end of his scarf. He stared at the trash can, and it was clear to anyone that he was seriously debating about diving in. Ida looked at Shoto meaningfully. He pointed to the coffee. Shoto nodded. What else could he do? Midoriya, Todoroki made extra coffee if you want, Ida offered. Midoriya looked at them, not quite comprehending. Huh? Todoroki held out the mug. Coffee. You can have it. The simple words seemed to break through to him. He took a step forward, his hands outstretched. Coffee? Todoroki put it into his hands. He hadn't noticed the scars or the warped knuckles yesterday. With his fingers firmly clasped around it, Izuku stared at Todoroki. I can have this? Yes. Todoroki was maybe expecting a thank you. It was totally unprepared for Midoriya bursting into tears. Luckily, Ida knew what to do because Shoto did not have a clue. He handed Midoriya a pack of tissues to mop up his tears. You're my hero, Todoroki-kun! Izuku grabbed his hand and squeezed. It's just coffee. Shoto managed to choke around his embarrassment. It's more than just coffee. It's life. It's energy. It's... Midoriya, you're going to be late for your next class. Crap! He squeaked and let go of Shoto's hand. Bye, Ida-kun. Bye, Todoroki-kun. Love you. Bye-bye. Did he? Ida nodded. He does that when he's sleep-deprived. He has zero filter. Shoto nodded. Are you blushing? Ida laughed. Shoto covered his face and muttered that he wasn't. Izuku tripped, going down the steps at the front of the library. The coffee flew out of his hands. No! When he arrived 4 minutes late to his English class, Ochako gave him a look filled with concern. Are you okay, Deku-kun? I want someone to push me into oncoming traffic, he whispered. English, please, Midoriya! The Professor Mike called out. Yes, sorry, he repeated in English. Ochako, could you please end my miserable existence in the quickest way possible? Very good, Midoriya! Thank you, Professor. The first thing Izuku did after his classes was fall face first into his bed and sleep for several hours. He woke up disoriented to see that it was dark outside, but he felt a lot better. Izuku grabbed a granola bar. It wasn't a substitute for real food, but he wanted to try and give Todoroki back his mug. He wasn't sure if he was still on campus, but he had no other place to look besides the library. He supposed he could text Ida and ask, or Ida could text Todoroki, or ask Ida to give Izuku Todoroki's contact info. He shoved the last of the granola bar into his mouth as he thought. The last idea was probably a little creepy, he reasoned. He was still cheering when Todoroki saw him. He was sitting at the table he'd been sitting at this morning and the night before. Hey, Todoroki said. Izuku gave him a wave and bobbed his head side to side as if that would help him chew quicker. He put a hand in front of his mouth when he could speak. Sorry, mouth is full. I skipped dinner. Oh, Todoroki started to rifle through his bag. I think I have some crackers. No, that's okay. I can't take all of your things. Izuku waved his hands frantically. Todoroki paused and looked at him. The concern creased between his eyes as cute. You sure? Yeah. Silence stretched out as Izuku stayed standing and Todoroki stayed sitting. Do you want to sit? Todoroki asked. I don't want to bother you. I was going to the dining hall. See you later. Izuku made it to the front doors of the library before he remembered the travel mug in his bag. He covered his face with both of his hands and groaned. God, he would look so stupid walking back there after that awkward display. Maybe Izuku could just bring the mug another day, save himself the embarrassment. But he didn't know if he would find Todoroki again so soon. Yeah, he'd been in the library 2 nights in a row, but it was to say that was his usual routine. It was the beginning of the semester. People's schedules always changed as they settled into something more comfortable. One of the librarians shushed him. Red-faced, Izuku apologized and walked back to the table that Todoroki sat at. He wished the ground would swallow him whole. Todoroki was at least nice enough not to appear too befuddled by his sudden reappearance. I came to give you back your travel mug, then I forgot about it, and then I remembered at the door. Izuku unzipped his backpack and set it on the table. I accidentally dropped it. I'm so sorry. I got a dent in it. I can replace it. Izuku started to run what was left of the month's budget in his head. Maybe if he skipped a meal? It's fine. I'm actually surprised you returned it. Todoroki tossed it into his bag without so much as a glance at it. Really? Aren't they kind of expensive? Juro started a collection of all the mugs she's taken from me. She probably has a post on her Instagram or something. I'm really used to buying several a week. Several a week? Izuku wheezed. Todoroki had to be rich. I come from a wealthy family. He blushed. Izuku slapped a hand over his mouth. I didn't mean to say that out loud. It's okay. I'd rather you said it to my face than behind my back. Izuku rubbed his face and laughed. Every time I've met you, I've made some sort of an idiot out of myself. First I twisted my ankle, and then I cried over coffee, and now this. Did you like the coffee? Todoroki asked. He was trying to look nonchalant in the way that people did when they really did care about someone else's opinion. Izuku didn't have the heart to tell him that he never tasted the coffee. It was great. I've never had better coffee. A complicated look passed over Todoroki's face. He looked pleased and sad, but it was hard for Izuku to get a good read. Todoroki had rather neutral facial expressions, so Izuku had to rely on his gut instinct. You're probably only saying that because you were sleep-deprived, but thank you anyway. As an afterthought, Todoroki graced him with a small smile. Sounds like you make a lot of coffee if you're keeping your other friends supplied a couple times a week. Plus the coffee you gave me. Do you often make a lot of it? I wouldn't peg you for a coffee kind of person. I'm not sure what a coffee person looks like. Like me! Izuku grinned. That cut another small smile out of Todoroki. You're right, I don't drink coffee. It's more of a habit to make it. Todoroki, do you have soul habits? Izuku put his hands on the table and leaned forward. I mean, I noticed your wrists are bare, so soul bands are out, and most likely soul words, but it's possible you have a less visible one. I was just curious. I love to hear about soulmate bonds. Yeah, I have soul habits. It's, making coffee. Todoroki politely coughed into his fist. I have soul habits too. My soulmate likes to sleep in a really cold room, and it sucks because sometimes it's so cold that I can't sleep, or I end up catching a cold if I go to bed with my hair wet. Izuku sat down across from Todoroki and pulled out his notebook he had dedicated to soulmates. That sounds troublesome. It can be, but I'm most concerned with how I'm ever going to tell who's my soulmate. Well, they have to walk into the room and it turns warm, or what? That also means that specific requirements have to be met. Like, why would I be taking a person into my room at night anyway? Can you tell who your soulmate is or isn't? Todoroki was quiet for a long time. Izuku was almost ready to retract everything he'd said. He'd probably overshared with this guy who he'd seen 3 times in 2 days. When he spoke, I feel kind of disappointed when people drink my coffee. It's like I'm holding my breath only to be let down, so I guess if my soulmate drinks my coffee, I won't feel like that. Izuku put his thumb to his lip and thought. He didn't want to say the wrong thing. On the one hand, it was nice that his habit gave him a clear path to find his soulmate, but on the other, Todoroki seemed deeply sad. Living with that constant, however slight disappointment every day had to take its toll. Can I have your contact information? Todoroki asked, startling Izuku. You want my contact information? If that's alright. If you'd rather not, I understand. Izuku shook his head. Todoroki gave him a curt nod. Okay. When Todoroki put his phone away, Izuku realized what he'd unconsciously done. Wait, no, I wasn't shaking my head to me, no. Izuku fumbled for his phone, nearly dropping it twice. Todoroki looked perplexed. I was surprised. Why would you want my number? His voice trailed off. Just in case I've made extra coffee and you might want some. Izuku handed over his phone and watched Todoroki put in his contact info. When he got it back, he noticed that he'd put a coffee emoji next to his name. Todoroki didn't seem like an emoji person. It made the gesture extra cute. You'll be like my very own coffee dealer. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck in embarrassment. That sounded a lot better in my head. Todoroki gave him a third smile. You would be surprised how difficult it is to give out extra coffee on a college campus sometimes. Really?
Izuku forgot about the dining hall and stayed to talk with Todoroki. He made sure that he got the details of his habit correct in his notebook, but the conversation just continued on after that. It was only when the library had closed and Izuku was halfway to his dorm that he remembered.
Crap! I forgot to wash it!
Hi, travelers. What's up? Sorry, it's been a hot minute. I had to start school and, adjust a little bit, but we're back now. So, hooray, you get to deal with me. And I hope you liked the first part of the Taste of Coffee. I love this one shot. It's so fun and fluffy, and it's my everything. I say that about everything I read, but it's true. I love it. It's perfect. Yeah, this is the first part of the fic. We still got another half to go. I'm just not super used to podficking things over 600,000 words yet. 6,000 words. My bad. I'm not super used to podficking things in one go over 6,000 words. So yeah, you'll be getting the next part of this in a couple of weeks. And until then, you have this to feed on. So yeah. I hope you liked it as much as I did. Maybe you wanna talk about it with me. I'm totally down for that. And make sure you drink your water, eat your food, take your meds if you need to, and have a good rest of your week. Okay? Okay. Alright, then I'll see you around. Okay? Bye-bye.